place feels like coming home to me, and I'm so grateful to Richard and Carla. If any of you haven't had a chance to meet them, they are the owners and founders of Seven Bridges, and this place is it's a creation of Richard's very creative mind, and he has some sculptures outside. But I owe so much of my success to Richard McKenzie, and I'm just beyond honored to have this room with my work, and have had a benefactor who saw something in me. I'll tell you briefly the story of how this came to be. So my art dealer in New York City at the time was Frank Bernaducci, and he called me one day and said, I need a birthday present for a good friend. I want you to paint this picture. And I said, sure, I'll be happy to do this for you. And he gave me a photograph of Richard McKenzie's Ferrari parked in a garage. And it was just parked in the garage. And I said, well, maybe I could come out and photograph it. Maybe, he has somebody that could just pull it out of the garage and we could get some light on it. He said, just make it work. And so I'm looking at this really bad photograph of this car. It's all in shadows, and then he said, oh, and I want you to put love on the license plate. I'm like, come on, Frank, you can be more creative than that. You're an art dealer. Let's come up with something a little more personal. Just love. Anyway, so I took this photograph and I made a painting where the garage disappeared. I put trees around it. I reflected the trees on the car. I put love on the license plate. And frankly, I was very nervous about the painting, thinking that it's not really mine. This is Frank's painting. Frank designed this, Frank created the idea, and it's Frank's painting, and I'm not comfortable with this, but here you are. I got paid for it and all that. And then that painting, soon after that, I got a call from Richard and Carla on Zoom and met them for the first time through the computer, and they fell in love with my work. And that started all of these commissions. I'm not the kind of person that says no. I pretty much, if somebody wants something from me, I will give it. And this was one time that I'm glad I have that character in me, because I think somebody else might have said no, because it wasn't really my design. But it turned out to be something so special, and it's in the Seven Bridges book that was published last year. Was it published last year, Jamie? Yeah, so it's in that book, and it's probably the only place that you'll find it. It's amazing to me that one gift created the spark in Richard's heart to start this whole thing. I'm going to tell you just a story about my life, which is how these car paintings came to be, and it involves two dads. It's a two-dad story, so it's kind of a long story. But it's a really deep personal experience as an artist, and how the two dads are how this came to be. Really interesting. I was raised by my stepfather, who is still alive. His name is Pat. He's an amazing man. He's been the most encouraging person in my life for my art since I was a very small child. I showed an aptitude for drawing as soon as I could hold a pencil, and I was drawing things all the time. I was born in '68. The computers back then were the size of a room, and my father was a computer programmer, so he would bring home these big boxes. Do you remember those computer paper pads that were like perforated, and they were green on one side? And I literally had boxes stacked to the ceiling of this paper when I was a little bitty kid. And I would draw and draw and draw, and I would roll out a whole thing of 100 sheets and draw on the sidewalk and draw all the time. And so I always tell people now when I teach art, I tell people when I teach that people develop as an artist not because they're good at it, they develop as an artist because they love it. Some people are immensely talented, like my children are immensely talented, but they have no interest at all. Jerry is here, he is here. Jerry, the Hartford, Connecticut radio DJ, just walked in. Excuse me. And anyway, so I didn't have great skill. I had great passion. And if I went to Toys R Us as a kid, I didn't want the toys. I wanted to go on the arts and crafts aisle and get every single thing there was, sand art, jewelry art, latch hook rugs, paint by numbers was like my favorite thing. So I did all that as a child. And anytime I had spare time, I was drawing. In first grade, I drew a picture on the wall of a cat and got swatted. So they tried to beat the art out of me in public school in Texas. I hope they don't hit kids anymore for that, because it didn't discourage me though. I didn't draw on the wall anymore, but I it did not stop drawing. I could see how that could be a trauma point for some people that would make them not want to do art. And another thing, just back and forth in my timeline, as a teacher now, I teach, my husband and I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I teach art, and I teach about twice a month. I have 90% retired people in my classes. And so many of them are, they had an art degree, they went to art school, and then they got out and they couldn't make it. Or their dad said, you need to be an accountant because you're not gonna make any money as an artist. And they come to me with hidden talents, and they're very discouraged. And I tell them it's never too late to start. But I also tell them it's so amazing to me how people are really talented and really creative, and their parents squelch that in them, and they push it down, and they make them feel like they're wasting their time being creative. And I never had that experience. I had quite the opposite. I was pushed. My dad, Pat, who raised me, pushed me sometimes too hard. But it was good. And I went to a really, how many of you are familiar with Houston at all? Nobody, okay. I was born and raised in Houston, and there's a school there called the High School for the Performing and Visual Arts. And it's an audition-only school, 600 kids. It's sister school to the New York School of Arts in the movie Fame. So if you've seen that movie from the 70s, it's like that. It's very competitive, very high pressure. The kids go to school an hour longer, and I drove an hour there and an hour back to get there. So my school day was very, very long at this school. Very intense competition, like I said, but it's also the place where I learned really how to do what I do. So anyway, my dad, he pushed me to go there. He took me to New York when I was in high school, expected me to go to school in New York. It was just expected of me. And I did the Parsons and Pratt and School of Visual Arts portfolio review, and was offered a scholarship for School of Visual Arts, and destroyed my dad's heart when I said, I'm not going to New York. No, not me, not in 1985. Which is when I was visiting. It was very scary to me back then, and I was a Southern girl, and I didn't want to be in New York City. Later I loved it, of course, but at that time, so he was pushing me to do this, and disappointed when I wouldn't, but he didn't continue to push too hard. I went to University of Houston and studied art. I do not have a degree. This is my own little thing. I decided freshman year, I want to learn every bit of art that I can. So after taking one semester of my core classes, I stopped and just did everything in art. I took painting, I took sculpture, printmaking, jewelry, graphics design. So the last 4 years of school, I went to school for 5 years, but I don't have a degree because I didn't take the core classes. I just kept going through every single subject in the art department that I wanted to learn. And I came out of there with no piece of paper, but a much more valuable art education than I could have gotten if I had done it the grown-up way. So, never been really one for following rules or for sticking with the program or anything like that. I kind of do things the way I want to do them, and my dad, actually he accepted that. He didn't really care about the degree. He saw what I was doing, and he wasn't too upset about that part. I had a little scholarship in there, and it was a good experience for me. But back to my childhood, at 9 or 10 years old, we took a trip to Colorado from Houston. I always had a psychic tendency, seeing things before they happened, really strong as a child. Always knowing things that nobody else knew, keeping these things really private, and having a kind of a deep spiritual awareness of things in my life. In this trip to Denver, I just went off by myself every day into the mountains and drew. And I would just sit there, and I felt more at home than I'd ever felt in my life. And I wanted to start drawing and painting landscapes. At one point, sitting there on a mountain by myself, I drew a picture of a man with a backpack, and it was kind of cartoonish, and there were these mountains behind him. And that was a psychic drawing of my biological father, who I didn't meet till I was 28. And the picture looked like him, and he lived there at the time. He was in Denver at the time that I drew this picture. So we'll get more into the second dad later. But there was an aspect of my psychic, deep emotional development that was the thing that made me want to paint. More than anything else. And people look at these car paintings and they see the reflections, and I've had people at shows say, I feel something spiritual in your paintings, but I can't put my finger on it. You know, they're car paintings, but there's something else going on. And I do believe that your emotions and your soul comes through your work, no matter what you do. At least it should. It should be transferred that way. So I came back from Colorado on that trip, and my parents at the time were foster parents, and we had kids in our house all the time, little kids, like 0 to 5 years old. So there were always kids around, and we had cloth diapers in the house. And my mom did craft stuff. She painted ceramics or things like that, and I didn't tell my parents I wanted to paint. I just took a cloth diaper and I wrapped it around a piece of cardboard and I stapled it, and I took her craft paints and I painted one of the mountains I saw, and showed my parents, and my dad's like, Jane, take her to the art store and get her some oil paints and find her a teacher. And so it's interesting now when I meet parents. I met somebody yesterday, and I asked, their kid's a really talented artist. He's 9, and they said he wants to paint. I said, what are you getting him to paint? She said, oh, acrylics, because he's a kid. I'm like, no, give him oils. Give him oil paintings. Don't do acrylics. It's better to start the right way. So I got into private lessons at a very young age and learned all the techniques, and mostly only painted landscapes. I had a passion for painting landscapes. I did, everybody got paintings for Christmas, and but I had real materials. I had good stuff. It wasn't like cheap kid stuff. My dad said, no, she needs the best. And so I remember the first time going to an art store, I was like so blown away. I'd been to craft stores, but I'd never been to a real artist, professional art store. And to be a little kid and being able to be gifted these tools to do something that ended up being the most important thing in my life at that age, I still remember. I remember the smell of the place and the smell of the oil paint and how that smell sticks with you forever as a child. And so I started painting, and I have not stopped painting since then. Have always loved oil and don't work in acrylic. I might do some acrylics with underpaintings for abstract pieces, but I don't do finished paintings in acrylic. Anyway, so let's get back to young child drawing. I was born in '68. My parents were silly, people back then. I guess maybe everyone did this, but they bought me a 1968 encyclopedia set when I was born. How many of you did that for your kids? It was really cool. I had that. I was so little, I didn't. But as I got to be like 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, I discovered the horse section of the encyclopedias and started drawing horses and became one of the little girls that loves horses and drew horses, studied the anatomy, would work on the muscles in their legs, and I was just a little kid doing this stuff. And I used the encyclopedia, and that's probably the beginning of my love for photorealism, because I love to copy something and make it look real, and to try to replicate an image into a painting that makes it looks like it's a photograph. I want to say one more thing about the landscape painting. These are my notes, sorry. Bob Ross. Come on. People make fun of him for years, but I think every artist my age is influenced by Bob Ross. Every one of them. Am I right, John?
You're right. Exactly.
Thank God for Bob Ross. He gave painting to the world. I know he has some silly techniques, and his personality is crazy, but he gave painting to regular people. And so while I'm taking lessons from somebody, we're painting Bob Ross type paintings in my lessons, and I'm watching him on Saturday mornings and trying to copy what he's doing. And I owe so much to that man. I wish I could have had a chance to meet him. I would just give him a big hug and say thank you, because he inspired me so much. I want to go back to my high school experience, HSPVA, because this is really interesting. When I first started at HSPVA, I also did music. I still do music. I played flute and oboe. And so when I first went into that school, I didn't go for visual arts. I went in for music. And the whole time I'm still doing my art at home, but I had become a pretty strong flute oboe player in junior high, so I auditioned and I got into the orchestra. And about halfway through, I was like, why am I doing this? I really want to be doing visual art. So I went to the counselor, and she was this really mean Swedish lady with a strong accent, and she kind of seemed like a Nazi or something. And I said, you know, I'm a painter, and I also do music, and you never allow anyone to have a dual major here, but you know, maybe I could be the first one, and I'll show you, I could do both just as well. And she's like, no. You know, she was just like, absolute no way. She said, I was 15. She said, you're gonna choose right now. You're sitting here right now. You're gonna make a decision and tell me what you're gonna do. Is it visual art or music? Because this can't go on. You can't be straddling the road. And she was mad at me. I said, okay. I choose visual art, and I dropped out of the school about 3/4 through the freshman year. And then I went to, and I ended up coming back there, I'll tell you that in a minute. I went to the public high school, because the PVA is a magnet school. It's still a public school, but it's a magnet school, so you have to audition to get in. I went to the public school, which was a really large, I don't know how big it was, one of the biggest schools. It's a suburban Houston school. And I got in pretty tight with the art teacher, with the principal, and they just treated me like royalty. I had paintings, the whole school. The office had my paintings, the principal had my paintings in his office. I didn't have to take all the regular classes. They let me take like half of my classes as art classes. I was really spoiled there. They really treated me well. And most of my friends were the teachers and the principals and not the students. And so that was 2 years, 10th and 11th grade, and I went back to HSPVA as a senior, and they have a policy in the art department there that you can't be there for 1 year. So immediately I was told, you have to be here at least 2 years, and also they don't let anybody back in that drops out. So those two things are against me, and I don't really care about stuff like that. If I have something I want to do, I'm going to try and do it. And so I tried, and I got in, and they just didn't follow those two rules on my account. So I went to that school as a senior and then graduated from there, and I learned so much more as an artist visually. That school is you work so hard. There's so many projects, and it was very, very challenging, but very rewarding. And I feel like I got most of my learning from that school, not from college. College was more for regular artists, and that's why I pushed it and did all the different subjects. But HSPVA was for artists that are going somewhere, artists that have strong potential to become professional. Anyway, so that's about the end of my childhood. When I first started showing in galleries, I was in my 20s. And young adult, I did portraits, I did faux finishing, I painted clouds on somebody's ceiling. I did anything. And I had a couple of jobs. I started working when I was 16 at Astro World, a Six Flags theme park, doing portraits and caricatures. And so I've pretty much been a professional artist since I was 16. And so I started off, a lot of portraiture, and you'll see on my slideshow in a little bit some portraiture. But when it was time to start showing in galleries, the catalyst for that was Dad Number 2. And I was 28 years old when Dad Number 1, Pat, came over and said, I'm not your biological father. I'm sorry we lied to you for 28 years. And I had dreams. I told you about the psychic stuff. I had dreams about this. I had dreams my parents were fake. My mother was my mother, but my dad wasn't. But so many little things Like for instance, this is one of the personal things I am somewhat embarrassed to say, but at 12 years old, I wrote a long letter to John Denver asking him to adopt me. Because I felt like I was in the wrong family. I felt like I don't know these people. I mean, even though my stepdad was encouraging to me, we didn't have an open heart relationship. For him, it was like, I want to see your work. I want to see you busy. I want to see you creating. And he wasn't open to me. And I learned later, after he told me about this, that he felt really obligated to encourage me in the way that my biological dad would, to see what's in me and pull that out. But he didn't have he does now, but he didn't have the emotional capacity to lie to me and be close to me at the same time. And I think if you're lying to somebody, it's always going to be a barrier to intimacy. And so I never felt close to him. My mother was very angry, and I was the one that calmed her down. She was abusive to my sister and brother, not to me, but I was her mother. So I had a family that I never felt at place in. And art to me was my solace. It was my way to get through that. I think a lot of artists come from rough backgrounds. Mine wasn't rough, but it was emotionally painful, and I felt alone. And my siblings are just nothing like me. My brother's a contractor, my sister's a nurse, and they're just sort of normal people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I was very abnormal. I had weird psychic stuff happening to me all the time. I was having visions and dreams. I saw angels all the time. And I wanted to do nothing but paint. And so I had a different approach to the world than the rest of my family. And so I started doing, after my dad came over that day and told me, dropped this heavy thing on me. And my first reaction was, I knew that. I felt that my whole life. My second reaction was, how dare you lie to me my whole life? And I got really angry. In the 70s, it was like that. People didn't tell you about stuff like that. It was common to hide birth origins. And I don't know why. I don't know why it's such a big deal. Just tell the truth, let people know who they are. If you don't know who your parents are, it's hard to know who you are sometimes. So I had this dropped on me. I was married at this point. I was 28 years old. My son was 4, and my daughter was 6 months old. And I kind of went into a tailspin, and I started making paintings about that. I don't actually have that on my slideshow. I should have put those in there. But I made a bunch of paintings about my dad, and I couldn't find him. I had his name. I had his social security number, which I had obtained illegally from somebody who worked in the office at University of Houston, where he also went. And so they were helping me find him. I hired a private detective. It took me 4 months to find him, and during that 4 months, I could feel him. I'm like, wait a minute, I know him. I had a ghost. My whole childhood, I felt like there was a ghost or a guardian angel or something following me, and it was always there to protect me, and that was my real dad. And I as soon as I found out about him, I knew that was him, and as soon as I heard his voice, I'm like, I know you, you're my ghost. And so he was there the whole time, and anyway, so the 4 months that I was looking for him, I painted and painted and painted, and I did these images that were generated from my imagination about what he looked like. I had a sister and a brother in that family. I painted a painting of my sister. It looked exactly like her. I ended up giving her the painting later. In fact, she called me. She's a cross stitcher. And she called me and she said, would you be upset if I turned your painting into a cross stitch? She said, I would make my heart sing if you did that. So she's gonna do that. But anyway, so those paintings were some realism, some abstraction. They were watercolor. And then when I met him, I felt like I'm home. This is who I am. I'm exactly like this guy. He drew horses when he was a kid. He was a jazz bass player. He played with Harry Belafonte, Sammy Davis Jr. He was super creative. He lived on 80 acres with no electric, no running water, in Tres Piedras, New Mexico, and just wanted to be isolated and creative. And he worked in the forest, and he taught music at University of New Mexico. Anyway, all these creative things about him were where I got it from. And so I finally felt like I have real family. I know my family. I know who I am now. I am just like this man. And we became very, very close. And for 5 years, I would bring my kids up to visit him. For 5 years, I spent really cultivating that relationship, and then he died in 2001. So for 5 years, I had my real dad. And then I was back to being really angry at my parents who raised me again, because it's like, you took him from me. I could have had him my whole life. He was the most important person in my life, and I only had him for 5 years. So that was really hard for me, but I have forgiven my dad and stepmom. I love them very much. It just took a while. But that experience of painting is what led to my abstract paintings. That's the precursor to the car stuff. The paintings of my dad were coming from this deep unconscious place, and they were partially abstract and partially realism. And so once I found him, and then I was like, okay, now I know who I am. I'm going to start getting my work out there. I had never tried to be in a gallery. I'd never pursued that before 28. And then it just started happening. I started painting out these big abstract expressionist paintings, some of them very large. And it just sort of happened naturally. I had somebody say, you should show here, and then I was showing in Houston and selling everything I painted, and it became very successful for me, sort of unexpectedly. And I feel like it was because I knew who I was, then it just came to me. I never asked a gallery to show my work. I always had somebody find me, which has been the story of my whole career, actually. But I'm going to show you just a few of my older abstract pieces. And it's hard to see how something like this can turn into something like this, but there's a method to my madness, so I'll explain it to you. Somehow the abstract painting that came in after I found my real dad was like letting go. It's like being free. It's just like letting loose. Like I feel relaxed. I don't have to copy from the encyclopedia right now. I can express myself for the first time because I really feel safe for the first time in my life. And so this is where the abstract pieces came from. I'm just going to scroll through a few of these. I don't have very many on here. A lot of red. To me, red is life and birth and joy, excitement. So quite a bit of this stuff. This piece the star ended up being part of my husband. He has an album, and I ended up using that star on his record. I think that's all I have on the abstract pieces. And so the abstract paintings, what happened with them was that I was kind of getting bored painting the abstract pieces, and I started looking for more inspiration. And so I'd be at a stoplight, and there'd be a shiny car next to me, and I would kind of be doing this, looking at the way the reflections move when I move, and like, whoa, look at that. And kind of seeing, I think the abstract paintings helped me to get into where I could see the abstractions and the reflections of the cars. And so to me it was a natural process. It didn't make a lot of sense to most people seeing this and then seeing this, but to me it was a natural process. And so I started painting very large abstract paintings of very small pieces of a car. And you couldn't tell it was a car. It was just like the lights and the shadow, and they weren't textural like these. They were more blended and smooth. And exactly what I saw, maybe just a section of something. I'm trying to see an example. Like that yellow Lamborghini back there, if you look at the door panel, I did one yellow painting that was about 4 by 8 feet, and it was just like if you zoomed in on those reflections. And I did a few of those, and they didn't sell. They didn't really get any attention, and I was kind of getting spoiled and used to selling everything I painted. And they didn't sell. I'm like, I wonder why. And I thought, I'm just gonna pull back and paint the whole car, because I can still do this abstract, cool reflection stuff, but I'm just gonna put the whole car in there. So it was probably 2004 or 3 that I decided to do a show, and I did 38 paintings. I sold out. I sold every painting in that show. And then like the next day I'm showing in New York at Michael Lands Weir was my first art dealer in New York. And it was like, okay, this is a thing. It was sort of an experiment. I didn't really plan on painting cars. I have to go back to why I painted cars to begin with. I didn't really plan on it. It was sort of an experiment, but after that show, I felt like this is my path. I have to do this for a while. The reason why I got into cars to begin with is because for graduation from high school, my first dad, Pat, gave me a 1970 Datsun Roadster convertible, which made me, and I was a kid that played with Hot Wheels. You know, I painted and played with Hot Wheels. And so I always had a thing about cars, but that first collector car that I was gifted for high school graduation made me become a car collector. And I started having, nothing really fancy. I had a 1970 Carmen Ghia convertible, a 1972 VW convertible, I had a 1970 Fiat convertible, I had a 1980 Mercedes that I loved so much, I had a 77 Corvette, and a 1976 Dodge Dart Swinger. I think that's all. But so those are my own personal cars over the years. So quite a few of them. At this stage in my life, I don't want an old car. I don't want the headaches. I don't want to break down somewhere. That little Datsun, I used to have to push start it. It was so small, I could do it by myself. Just push start it because I couldn't get the freaking thing. It was so old. It was beautiful, but the engine wasn't great, and I was push starting it all the time. And then the Dodge Dart was like steering a boat. It was no power steering, and it's like, you know, it's a tank. Anyway, I don't collect cars anymore. I drive a Land Rover and a 4Runner, and they're dirty trucks, and we live in Santa Fe, and they're off road, and that's what we need, and that's all we want right now. Nothing fancy anymore. Anyway, so once I started showing in New York, it took off so fast, and it was dizzying. I had press. I was in the New York Times. I was in the New York Sun. I was in the Village Voice, and I had so much attention on my work. And I'm still saying, wait, but I just was experimenting. You know, I didn't mean to get stuck here. I liked it, but I wasn't. I never would have seen myself as like an HSPVA, as a high schooler, doing these paintings for 20 years. Or not quite 20 years, but almost 20 years. I never would have foreseen that. I had no idea what I was going to be, landing in. But that subject matter just became my thing for a very long time, and it was fun for a very long time. It was fun until it wasn't, and it wasn't fun after pushing myself so hard, painting 40, 50 paintings a year for 17 years. And getting burned out and feeling like, okay, I really want to do something different. And at this point I was showing with Bernaducci Mizell Gallery in New York, and Frank Bernaducci, who I adore. I owe so much to him. How many of you know Frank Bernaducci? Not very many. Nobody else knows him. Okay. How many of you know who Lou Mizell is? Okay, still not very many people. Lou Mizell is the father of photorealism, and I met him through Scott Richards' Contemporary Art in San Francisco, and I was down in Miami with Scott Richards and his wife Alina, because they showed my work, and I was doing a fair down there with them, doing the art fair. And Scott over golf, because Richard probably plays golf too, doesn't he? Did he? All the art guys play golf. I don't know what that is. But Lou Mizell and Scott Richards over a golf tournament decided that I was going to show with Lou Mizell. So we had dinner, and I accepted that, and I was very, very happy to be included in that group, and I left the gallery that I was in. But Lou Mizell coined the word photorealism in 1968, and he is, he's responsible for a lot of the love of that genre coming to be. He pushed it, he created it. He didn't create it, but he coined the word and made it a thing. And he's one of the top art dealers in the world, and he's one of the richest men in New York. He owns a lot of Soho. But he had another gallery with a partner called Frank Bernaducci, and it's Bernaducci Mizell Gallery that closed in 2019. So, and that was the gallery that showed the younger artists and the newer artists. And so I showed with them for 15 years. Frank Bernaducci had a massive stroke in 2019, and he wasn't able to continue the gallery, and we still communicate regularly, but he's no longer working as an art dealer. So that closing of that gallery, and my work was sent over to Anthony Brunelli Fine Art, and John Brunelli is here. He is my art dealer as well. The work is there now. Excuse me. But for me, that was my way to just kind of, let's try some more things. Let's try different subject matter. Let's just start going inward and seeing what do I really want to do inside of me. And the cars have been, to me, a way to express my femininity. And I feel like cars are feminine, and it's always men in the world of cars. It's like, hey dude, what kind of engine you got? It's like, I don't even care about the freaking engine. I would go to car shows for photographs and take thousands of photographs, and I'm with all these kind of typical car guys, and I'm like, can you close the hood? They're like, what? I'm like, just close it, please. I just want to see the curves. I want to see the femininity. I want to see the light, the way it plays on it. And to me, it was never, even though I was a car collector, it was never about the engine. I like the way they look. I like the way that, to me, a car is like a feminine thing going down the road. Now the cars are not like that, but back then, they were sexy, and they had curves, and they had hourglass figures, and to me, and that's why the people name their cars after girls. They're girly, and so. I still want to express that femininity, but I am going in different directions. I do car paintings for commissions, but I don't do shows like these anymore. If I had Richard McKenzie asking me for 20 more paintings, I would be happy to do that. But I'm not going to make a show of car paintings to show at Anthony Brunelli Fine Art, because I'm moving on to different subjects. And I'm going to go back to my notes here. Oh yeah, I was going to go back to the New York thing. The experience I had as being a New York artist in a very, before 2016, I think 2016 it started to get to change, but before 2016, New York was big time art. It was fun, and I would get drawn into these kind of entourage with different artists, and we would be gallery hopping, we'd be restaurant bar hopping, we'd be out till 5 in the morning sometimes. I was hanging out with Igalo Zeri and can't even think of his name. There are a bunch of artists, Tom Fruin, and had John Newsom, had a whole group of artists and collectors and art dealers, and we would just do the art thing in New York. It was like, okay, you're cool. We had a party at Edward Abbey's house. Edward Abbey was the playwright who's a great Virginia Woolf. Had a party in the Trump Tower. Richard Massey. Anyone know Richard Massey? But having all these kind of big time players in my life, I just wanted to know who they were as people. I was never impressed with all the flash and all the money. And I didn't fit in with that crowd, but it was fun to be a part of it for a while, and to be noticed, and to be on that cutting edge art world in New York City. And I was in New York 4 or 5 times a year for many years during that time, and that sort of settled down when I got into Bernaducci Mizell Gallery, because they're more professional, they're more grown up, they're not like the party scene, and so that sort of fizzled away, which was fine with me. But I really loved Frank Bernaducci. I really loved showing there, and they were really good to me. They sold so much of my work. And Frank, at some point, maybe 2017, I said, Frank, I kind of want to start doing some other things. How would you feel if I tried something else? He's like, nope. I'm like, Frank, I'm getting burned out, and so all these things, wanting to evolve, wanting to change, wanting to grow as an artist and try something different didn't happen until 2019. And so after 2019, I thought, this is the scariest thing in my life. I don't know what to paint. I have no idea. I'm like completely lost. I was like, well, what do you really want to paint? Well, I went back to faces, to portraits, and I'll show you some of those in a minute. Let me just scroll through a few things. These these were actually not done recently. These are a little bit older. I was painting, when I was painting the cars and I was right in the middle and I first started to want to go a different direction, I did this small series of my daughter with the water. And this was 2007 and I just did a few paintings, and my daughter was 10 when I painted these. Anyway, so 2019, when I started to explore and play with different ideas, I started doing a few portraits. I've always loved trees. I've always wanted to paint trees, and trees and portraits are still kind of one of the directions that I'm going. But it was a very scary thing. It's like when you're young and you're learning to be an artist and you don't know what you're doing and you have a blank canvas that's white and you're like, why does it have to be so white? You know, or an empty journal and you have to start writing in it and you don't know what to say. It's intimidating. As a teacher now, I first thing I do when we walk in, I'm like, just paint something, cover the canvas, any color you want, and then I'm going to give you a lecture, and then we'll start painting. But I don't want them to look at a white canvas because it scares me, scares them. It doesn't scare me anymore, but it did during this time. I just played with things, and I did a few kind of dream. I like to work from my dreams a lot. This unicorn skull thing was a dream, and mysterious, and this is a model that I've used before. She's kind of quirky. And so these were just sort of transitional paintings. This was my granddaughter when she was 2. Yeah, she's 7 now. This one is, this is 6 feet by 3 feet. This is a girl that I just saw her in a store, and she had hair down past her knees, and I said, I need to paint your hair. I'm like, you don't know me, but can I paint you? I'll pay you I took a photo shoot of her. It's called Supplicant. And so still just transitional, not really knowing where I'm going, and I still don't really know where I'm going, but I made some paintings that were really fun and personal to me. This one took 200 hours. I listen to audiobooks when I paint. I was listening to Les Miserables, so it was like a 70-hour book, and the book is done. I'm like, the painting's not done. Anyway, so it was a very long painting. I did some animal pieces. Once again, just exploring, playing with different things. I worked on a big bear painting for a long time, and then it was almost finished, and I just decided I didn't want to do the bear. So I haven't painted over that yet. I had a bear in California. I lived in the redwoods in California for 12 years after Houston, and I had a bear that was harassing me for about a year, and I painted her. So this painting represents my sort of the new trajectory more than anything else. And this painting came from a dream. It represents the way that I want to work now, which is from my dreams and from my heart. So the painting here, I started this in 2020 or 21. My husband and I moved to Santa Fe in 2020. And we went to this Guatemalan shaman woman and did some different techniques with her. And she couldn't speak English. She's American. Her husband's a doctor. He was a doctor in Houston. And we were seeing him, and he says, I think you guys need to see my wife. And so we did a session with her. She can't speak English, so she's on the phone with her daughter in Guatemala, who's translating. So it's kind of funny, translating on the phone. And we did an aura reading, and this is all kind of New Age stuff. I'm not into New Age stuff, but this was a fun experience. Put on these headphones, and she did an aura reading of me, and my color was all blue and purple, and it was very beautiful. And she said, you're very spiritual, you're very centered, and and you're very deep and wise, but you need to have more joy in your life, and you need the color that you need to focus on is that pink color. And that's your soul's healing color. So when you think about color, if you paint, whatever, use that color. And then she did my husband's aura after me. His whole aura was that color. It was bright pink. And so I thought that's kind of cool. And we got home that night, and he turned over, we're in bed, we're about to go to sleep, and his phone accidentally took a picture of me. And I'm like, because it was a flash. So I did that, and I said, wait, let me see that. And I look at the picture of just me like this. It's a terrible picture. Go to bed, and I dream this painting exactly like this, with the skull and the flowers and the color. And the title of the painting is The Return of God. And to me, it was like, my soul is waking up again, and I'm going to start working from the deepest parts of who I am, and not from, what is the gallery going to sell? Not from what people think I should do, but what I need to do as an artist, as a soul-connected person. So this painting was the beginning of that. And I worked on this piece for 2 years before I was satisfied with it. And it's not really related to any other painting, but it is very transitional to me. And now, the things I'm doing now, which I will show you here, are very different. And they're kind of pulling together the abstract work and the photorealism. Let me just show you. So I started painting angel paintings that are based on classical sculptures, a lot of cemetery paintings, cemetery sculptures, mostly European. I do have one that is from New York, but I'm using stock images and creating my own painting from these images. And it's interesting to me because my daughter, who's 28, is she's been my sounding board for my work my whole life. And when she was a kid, I used to pay her to read to me in the studio before Audible. And she's a reader. She'll read like 5-6 books a week. The girl's an insane reader. So she's always been in my studio. Now she's in California. We're not so close distance-wise anymore. But still, she's the person that I say, is this finished? And she'll say, no, you got to work on this part. And she always has an opinion, and she's very good at it because she's been looking at me paint for her entire life. But when I started painting the angels, and I said, I started this new series I want to show you, she said, you were talking about doing that 10 years ago. And I had no memory of that. So to me, it was brand new, but apparently I had wanted to do this a long time ago, but it got squelched with so many commissions, so much work. I want to go back to the 2019 thing. I have hardly sold any paintings since 2019. So, you have to make a decision. Are you gonna make a lot of money, or are you gonna be true to yourself as an artist? So, I believe that being true to myself as an artist will transition into making money again. But it's been a while since I've had a great art career. Show you some more of these. This one's from New York. This one's actually a collage. It's not even a painting. I teach a collage class, and I was like, I need to have a demo. So I made two pieces like this that are collage based. So you can see the abstraction coming back in with the realism, and trying to blend. It's for me. I feel like I'm pulling in, more of my different painting styles and being more cohesive as a painter. And trying to honor all the different styles in my history as an artist, and put them together, make them work together. This was the other collage. I think that might be the last one. No, not quite. So this is what I've been doing the last couple of years, as well as some landscapes. This is from a sculpture in Houston that I had visited a few times. Howard Hughes is buried there. And in the original sculpture, there's a woman's name, and she's a famous, Houstonian. But to me, I put hope because it was like, this is 2020 and beyond, and I thought people had given up hope. And so the painting is about, the grief of what we've been through the last few years. Okay, landscapes. So the angels are one. I've been doing the angels, and I've been doing some landscape paintings. And I live in the most beautiful, it's so pretty in Santa Fe. How many of you have been to New Mexico? Have you been to Santa Fe? Yeah, Santa Fe is fabulous. If you're an art appreciation person, then Santa Fe is a great place to visit. And if you're a painter, I mean, if you go to New Mexico, there's so many landscape painters, but it's impossible not to paint it. You know, my husband always says God's a mad painter because every night the sky is like on fire. It's so dramatic, and the people there are sensitive and open, and we've made more friends there than anywhere else we've been, and so we're very much at home in New Mexico. But the landscape painting is something that I'm going to continue to do, and it's taken me back to my childhood as a young, you know, Bob Ross inspired 10-year-old, and so it's kind of new. I haven't done very many paintings, and my favorite painting of all time, I think, or one of my favorite paintings recently for sure, is this tree. It's a juniper tree. We have 5 acres, and we're just outside of town. We have a pretty private road, and I was walking down the road, and I stopped in front of this tree. I'm like, I see you, you know, and just started talking to it, took a picture, painted it, and we had a neighbor who just passed away a month ago, and he was right behind us, and he was 82. We were really close to him, and he always wanted to know. He was an art collector, and always wanted to know what I was doing, and I showed him this, and he said, "That's my tree." I said, "Bill, it's not even on your property." He said, "I know, but I've been pruning it, talking to it, loving that tree for 10 years. That's my tree." So I made a big print for him, hung it on his wall, and every time, it was about a year before he died that I gave him the print. Every time I saw him, he's like, "I love my tree, I love my tree, I love my tree." It just meant the world to him. And anyway, so this, and I think the tree spoke to me because he had put his love into it. And another side story, totally unrelated to the tree, but related to being transferring emotions through art. After my biological father died in 2001, I was in Taos for his funeral, and there's a road called Blueberry Hill, which is on a hill, and the funeral happened, and then there was this beautiful sunset. And I sat there for a while, just like, you know, grieving and really feeling the moment and just experiencing that sunset, that place. And I came home and painted it was about this size, but a landscape, you know, version of that. It was a landscape, it was an abstract landscape. And to me, it was really full of love and grief, and I titled it Blueberry Hill. Came home, put it in a show, and came to an opening with this painting in it, and I walk up to this man in front of my painting standing there crying. And the painting, the title didn't have any indication what the painting was about, and he didn't know what it was about. I said, why are you crying? He said, "I just lost my mother, and this painting makes me think of her." And so that to me blew my mind, that I'm doing a painting of a landscape that's about grieving, and he's picking up the exact same thing. And there's no mechanical method. There's no one telling him. There's no written, nothing about it. Just the painting, speaking to this man the same thing that I felt. And he bought it, so he bought that painting that night. And I realized then how powerful we are as artists, and how. And there are artists that paint, you know, angry and violent things, and those get translated equally. And we don't always know that. And I think about this artist from New York. Well, he wasn't from New York. He showed in New York. Oh, what's his name? He was German, and he was pretty popular for a while in the early 2000s. And you might know him. You might know who he is. All of his work was brutally violent, and I always thought, why are you working this way? And I think the artists that do that they're just so tortured, and they're trying to torture you back, you know? And so it's the same way you can translate evil and negativity through your art, the same way you can translate love and beauty. And to think that you paint a painting and it's just a painting is ridiculous. Every artist is communicating something. And so I want to communicate, you know, like this painting actually happened because we're building a art studio. It's almost finished. It'll be done in the next month. The architect came over to our house, and he's like, "We're gonna put it here." He's like, "But you have to get rid of all these juniper trees." I said, "No way, I'm not cutting down any trees." He said, they're horrible. They're horrible trees. I have better trees for you. We'll get you a good landscaper. We'll plant the right trees. I said, these are the right trees because they're here. They live here, you know? I said, get off my property. You're infecting it. And I painted this painting, and he came over again. I'm like, Patrick, look at this tree. I want you to see what I see, you know? And he was like, wow. I said, junipers are beautiful. They're alive. They're magical trees. So anyway, that's the story about translating through a painting and the power that artists have. And that's where I am right now. I want to paint more trees. I may do more angels, but I'm right. Like I said, I paint from my dreams a lot. I'm dreaming about paintings of trees right now. We'll see where it goes. I'm not being controlled by any pushy art dealer right now, so I can do what I want until I get that art dealer and they start pushing me again, which wouldn't be the end of the world. I'm just going to try to do what I want.